Manchester City have lost 8 of their last 12 games and are now on course to register their lowest goal-scoring season under Pep Guardiola. After years of success, where has it all gone wrong? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, Manchester City have had a terrible start to their season with a run of defeats compounded by a 2-1 loss in the Manchester derby at the weekend. Is there a way back for the Blues? And is it time for Pep Guardiola to bow out?
One win in his last 11 matches, Pep Guardiola is in crisis mode and his team's season is in tatters. Manchester City's latest defeat came at the hands of arch-rivals Manchester United. The Red Devils scored 2 late goals to win 2-1 at the Etihad and all but ended City's feeble hopes of staying in the title race. The citizens now sit 9 points adrift of leaders Liverpool, who have a game in hand. After the match, Guardiola shouldered the blame.
I'm the boss, I'm the manager, and I'm not good enough. It's as simple as that. I have to find a way to talk to them, to train to them, to the way you have to play, the way you have to press, the way you have to build up. And I'm not good enough. I'm not doing well. That is the truth.
Once an unstoppable force, City's trophy-laden era, 6 Premier League titles, 4 in a row, and a Champions League triumph now feels distant. Injuries have decimated an ageing squad. Losing the world's best player Rodri to a season-ending injury in September left a gaping hole in midfield. Starman Kevin De Bruyne has struggled with fitness and form, while defenders Stones, Ake and Akanji remain sidelined. The struggles aren't limited to England. A 2-0 defeat to Juventus in Europe leaves City in 22nd place in the Champions League. With just 2 games left, even the knockout stages are in jeopardy. Guardiola's magic touch appears to be fading. Can he find a way to salvage the season, or has City's dominance finally run its course?
Well, let's meet our guests. I'm delighted to say here with me in the studio is Lance Santos, who you just heard from there. He is TRT World sports correspondent. We also have Mina Rzouki. She's sports journalist and broadcaster. And Nigel Sands from the Manchester City Supporters Club. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Nigel, I'll come to you first. What's gone wrong?
What's gone wrong?
Everything?
I think, yeah, well, there's quite a few things, aren't there? I would say you've got to realise that the team has had fantastic success over the last 4 or 5 years. Yeah, we've won, as you know, lots of trophies, almost everything. And so, as a result, we've played more games than every other club. Yeah. And so, Pep likes to rely on certain players, and he hasn't been able to rotate those players as much as he'd like to because of the recruitment, both, I would say, in and out of the club. So in terms of the fact that the players that have come in, some of them, like Guardiola, have been good enough to replace and come into the team, but others haven't been quite good enough to replace. And then certain players we've allowed to go out, yeah, such as Cole Palmer and Alvarez, who are the obvious ones.
So he's made mistakes.
So
would you acknowledge he's made mistakes?
I would. Well, Pep might be listening to this. No, I don't think so. I mean, he was hoping that Núñez was going to replace Cole Palmer, and that Oscar Bob, who broke his leg in training, was going to replace Alvarez. Yeah. And that was his plan, but it hasn't worked.
So you've been very unlucky with injuries.
And hugely, as a result of the rotation, we've ended up with an old team, and as a result, older players get injured.
So, Mina, they've been very unlucky with injuries. By their own standards, Manchester City would never have thought in August that they'd be where they are now.
No, they wouldn't have thought so. And they have been unlucky with injuries, but this is a common problem in Europe right now. We've seen Juventus have suffered 2 centre-back ACL, lost 2 centre-backs to ACL injuries. Real Madrid have lost 2 defenders to ACL injuries. Right now, that we know that there is an injury problem across Europe. But I would say that squads have been building themselves, acknowledging the fact that there are so many competitions and finding ways in which to address these problems. So perhaps Manchester City dropped the ball a little bit when it comes to future planning of the squad. That's one thing that I have to note. But yes, I would say that perhaps they thought, you know, we're doing so well, we have the mentality, we have the experience. I think Gundogan, for example, went to Barcelona and realised that what Barcelona didn't have was that winning mentality that he saw in Manchester City. He said that the dressing room was so different, it was filled with so much desire and a winning mentality that he just didn't see at Barcelona at the time under Xavi. And yet, right now, it seems that they're having problems bringing out the system, Pep's system, bringing it to life. And unfortunately, when that happens, we've now seen a loss of that winning mentality. They seem to not be able to get over that psychological hurdle.
Lance, that's a very good point, isn't it? I mean, for years, we've seen this ruthless drive from Guardiola and Man City. People feared them. That fear is gone.
It is for now, but it will come back. Pep Guardiola is too good. I don't believe Manchester City are totally out of things just yet. I think once they get cooking again, there's still good players on the pitch, enough to beat a lot of the opponents that they've lost to. You're looking at Phil Foden is still on the pitch, a dip in form for him. You're talking about a player like Jack Grealish. I know he's been woeful at the minute, hasn't scored a goal for over a year. Kevin De Bruyne is still there. They've got Edison in goal. There's still some big-name players there. Pep will get it right. He will come round. And I think to write them off totally, I think at this stage you'd have to say they're not in for the Premier League title race, are they? Unless something dramatic happens with Liverpool. But I think there's still a lot for Manchester City to play for. There's still the FA Cup competition. They still will want to push on to make that top four, of course. And I think with these players, they will get something right. But I think Mean's completely right when I said there's a bit of tactical naivety from the board. There's a lot of over 30s players in that side. Perhaps a bit more future planning, but this is not something that can just be pinned on Manchester City. Look across the board, Juventus have issues, Real Madrid, Tottenham are down to one first-choice centre-back. There's too many matches. Pep is right, there's completely too many games. What I thought was interesting, where it started to come undone for Pep Guardiola, was when he was talking about all of these injuries to his players and he was going into that cup tie which they lost against Tottenham. That was the beginning of the run. Haven't seen Pep Guardiola, I don't want to say throw away a game, but he didn't care about that game. He made it clear weeks ago he was going to play the kids, and there was just too much football. He was telling us then that his side had major problems.
Nigel, what will it say about Guardiola if he keeps his job, he stays at City, he rebuilds, and they come again? That would be the true sign of a champion coach, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, it would. It would. I mean, it absolutely would. And I'm sure he will do. And, you know, the players will come back. You know, most of those are older players. But the recruitment will be there to bring the young, you know, the younger players in and of the right ability.
Do you worry that some of the hunger has gone?
I don't think the hunger's gone. No, I think it's just too small a squad, as I said before, with the lack of rotation, and so they're tired. A lot of those players are mentally tired as well as physically tired. I mean, look at the number of goals that we've conceded in the last 20 minutes of games, particularly, I'm afraid, against Manchester United. And
tell me, when you go to games, you're a season ticket holder. Yeah. What are people saying around you in the crowd?
Actually, funnily enough, an air of acceptance, because they understand that there are so many injuries, and the recruitment hasn't been quite up to standard. And you hear the word, or the two words of Cole Palmer quite a lot.
The fact that you let him go?
Yeah.
How does it feel as a fan then, seeing him transform Chelsea? I mean, the guy's a beautiful, beautiful footballer.
Well, he had 2 or 3 games before he left the club where he suddenly had come good. I would say the seasons before, the season before, he was fairly indifferent. And then the last 3 or 4 games prior to him leaving, he looked a fantastic player.
Mina, do you think Guardiola still has that same passion and hunger and drive? I mean, he has all the money in the world. He's won absolutely everything everywhere. Do you think we're beginning to see a decline in his drive?
I wouldn't say that, no. I don't think, if anything, I think this has made him even hungrier because he's desperate to prove that he can resolve the situation, which is why I think that he went for the contract extension, because this is a new challenge for him. He's not going to leave the club unless he leaves it on great terms in the way that Jurgen Klopp has left Liverpool, for example. Make sure that there is something there is something to develop. And so knowing the way that Manchester City is right now and the problems that they're suffering, this is going to be a challenging moment for him. But to be honest with you, he has to resolve this. And yes, I think we do have high expectations of him. But there are high expectations of everyone. Every coach who is going through this must resolve the issue. And he must look at himself and identify some of the mistakes that he has made going forward. Perhaps he's a little bit stubborn. Perhaps he's too obsessed with having a small squad. And then when you do suffer injuries because you are playing in so many competitions, then maybe your small squad doesn't work anymore. And perhaps having a system that must work at all times, and then when there is a glitch in the system, they don't concede 1 goal, they concede 2 or 3, if you notice that. And we've seen that in the Champions League. And he still, all these years later, hasn't really addressed that very well, to be honest with you. So I think there's things that he must look at. He won the treble because he started to look at things that he was doing and address that, you know, when it comes to, for example, direct play, the way that they concede from counterattacks. He started to look at ways in which physicality was important. And yet we look at the way that the squad is constructed now, and you have so little physicality within that team right now. It's too small for a team that is playing in too many competitions. And they have the money to spend. So why aren't you spending it? Juventus don't have the money to spend. Real Madrid have all sorts of things that they can't spend that money on, unfortunately. But City can, and they're in the richest league in the world. So why are you not spending it? Why are you not holding on to as many great players as you can, or identifying and scouting some of the best? And if you fail to do that, think of the kids.
Lance, we are days away from the January transfer window opening. City fans will be hoping for some new arrivals. Do you think Pep will spend some money in January?
I think they have to. I think there's no question about it. I think you're going to see between 4 and 6 signings. I think Manchester City simply have to. If they want to not write the season off, they need to replace Rodri. That was the biggest... I mean, not saying replace him long-term.
How can you replace Rodri?
It's very, very hard, but there are good players like Edison. You know, you get a guy looking inwards to the English Premier League. A guy like Adam Wharton could fill the role. Not Rodri's calibre, but you get someone there who plays a similar kind of system. Rodri's a Ballon d'Or winner. That was arguably the biggest blow for Manchester City. And as we discussed a little earlier, Rodri just continued to play, didn't he? He played, and he was great for club and country. So you rip him out of that midfield, and then you lose some of the more... most of the defence is gone, the goalkeeper's gone at a stage. So they have lost a lot. I think they have to go in January. Now, one thing is interesting, while people, when you talk to fans and that, and particularly non-Manchester City fans, and you talk about their January transfer window, there's, of course, the looming charges over Manchester City. So,
financial fair play.
Yes, which, of course, City deny any wrongdoing, and that will all come out next season. Perhaps that might have some indication as to if Manchester City know which way that is leaning, as to where their transfers will be aiming.
Nigel, what's the vibe around the club then? Are you sensing that there will be money spent in January?
I think there has to be money spent in January. Almost certainly there'll be money spent in January, yeah.
Where would you like to see it spent?
I would definitely like to see a replacement defensive midfield player. Yeah, I mean, if you look across that midfield, they're all very small players, you know, as we've said. So we need a couple of bigger people in there.
And you'd welcome someone like Adam Wharton, full England international, great career ahead of him.
I'm not a player, you know, analyst or whatever, but he could definitely work.
Yeah. Lance seems to think as many as 6 players coming in.
Well, I think Gary Neville said 3 or 4 maybe, just to change things up. I mean, if you look at the squad as a whole, there are probably 9 players that you would keep. You know, I wouldn't say keep is the wrong word. I wouldn't say dispensable, but those you build a new team around. There'd be 9. So how many more do you need? You know, if you've got a squad of 23, then you need a few, don't you?
Mina, just on the issue of the financial fair play regulations, so it's now 130 charges against Man City. The club denies any wrongdoing and are confident they will be cleared. That verdict will come in the coming weeks. What do you think it will do to Manchester City Football Club if it's not what they want?
Well, it would be quite a devastating blow. I think for them, I think for the relationship with Guardiola, who has maintained that he hasn't been lied to, and that he is a coach of that squad because he believes what he's been told by everyone. So if it doesn't come up that way and it isn't positive, then I think that these problems are just going to get steeper, because it's going to be much harder to sign great individuals when you're looking at so many charges, and what are the possible repercussions of that? Will you be demoted? Is it just a financial penalty? It depends on what the repercussions are. But in all honesty, right now, I think that they must be focusing solely on what happens on the pitch and think about off-pitch matters at a later date, because right now they need to make sure that they stop conceding goals and they start getting back to winning ways.
And Lance, one thing we've noticed the last few weeks in the Premier League, everyone else has caught up. I mean, there was a time when Manchester City were out of sight. I'm a Liverpool fan, and it pains me to say it, that as good as we were, they were that much better consistently. And now other clubs fancy their chances, home and away.
Absolutely, and why wouldn't they? They'll have a go at Manchester City, whereas before, you look at famous sports teams from even different sports, like the All Blacks in rugby, they were 10 points ahead of you before you take into the pitch. The same with the Bulls in basketball. City had that aura. And you go to the Etihad just hoping to come away with a point. But now you're going to the Etihad, you're thinking these guys are there for the taking. They're shot for confidence, completely shot. They should have won that Manchester derby. But as we spoke of earlier, fatigue kicks in, self-doubt creeps in. You saw Silva, his comments after the game, calling his own side an under-15s team, saying it's totally, totally unacceptable, the way they switched off in that last 10 minutes. And it's errors that they wouldn't be making. That's a City side that has closed out big competitions. They got so used to just being a juggernaut, grinding out wins and playing very smart football as well, doing the right things in the right areas. And that seems to have just fallen away at the minute. And that's something that Pep is struggling to find. And Pep himself his body language is of the kind we've never seen Pep Guardiola like before.
Nigel, as a fan, what would you like to see from the players now? Because these guys are millionaires. They're getting paid colossal money every week to play for your Manchester City. And quite frankly, they've not been good enough this year.
I think that's a bit unfair, but I think they are trying their utmost. Yeah. But when you get a couple of players back, key players back, Kanji back, Ake back, Stones back, I think you'll find it'll be a different team again.
Have you sensed then in the stadium when other clubs come that there's more confidence about them? As Lance said, I always got the feeling the last few years you'd watch players in the tunnel walking out onto the pitch at the Etihad and the away team looked beaten before they'd set foot on the grass.
I would say generally not, but when Manchester United came out for the second half, they looked as if they changed their tactics and they looked as if they thought they could get something from the game. And City didn't try, they how to put it, they didn't press them in the way that they normally do, and they didn't get the ball, so they lost the possession stats.
But you had that game won. The Manchester derby, it was in the bag, 7 minutes to go, you were cruising. It could have been, the narrative would have been very different if you'd won.
It could have been. It could have been absolutely different because we'd have been 6 points behind Liverpool.
Just talking Liverpool, Mina, I mean, Slot, the new Liverpool coach, has come in. They've spent hardly any money. He must be pinching himself because I would imagine at the start of the season, he would have thought, if we can be neck and neck with Man City at the end of April, I'll be happy with that.
Yeah, you sort of feel a little bit sorry for Klopp. He left, and this would have been the easiest season for him. What a season to leave. He was sick and tired of Manchester City, and then this is what's happening right now. I think that what's interesting about Arne Slot as well, and what Liverpool have, is that ability right now to control games and to not concede, right? You're seeing the mastery of their defence right now. We're talking about a City side that historically conceded under one a game. So 0.97 is their statistic. If you look at the last 11 games alone, we're looking at 2.3 goals conceded per game. That is a huge upswing from just the one that they conceded. More importantly, there used to be other people who could score goals for them, whereas right now they're dependent on Haaland getting that. It is 38% of dependency on Haaland getting the goals, whereas it used to be 29. Other people would be chipping in. But when you've got the likes of Gundogan and Silva covering so much ground and not being physical players, Silva has said before that he just doesn't understand people who go to the gym because the gym is for players who don't know how to use their feet. And when he is boasting about that, and then he is asked to cover so much ground in a very exhausting season because of the massive injuries that they've gotten, then you can start to see where the problems are.
Lance, what will success look like in 2025 then for Manchester City? Can you see them salvaging anything out of this season?
I think Pep will be breaking this down into little periods now until he can get key players back. So I think if you were to look at January, right, that's when we can, if you're Manchester City, you say, right, we can bring some players in. So what can we do until January? And you look at the fixtures, Villa, Everton, Leicester, West Ham. All of those winnable for Manchester City. Perhaps not under this form. They'll have to get better. They will have to. And then you look at Liverpool's, the team they're chasing down. They still, those 4 games until January the 5th, they have Spurs, Leicester, West Ham and Man United. 2 difficult, tricky games in there in Spurs and Manchester United. Yes, Manchester United.
I was going to say Leicester and West Ham, actually, Lance.
Spurs could do anything. You could win 5-0, lose 5-0. But what Pep will be doing now, in terms of talking long-term picture, how can we get over this next hurdle? How can we get to January? And that 4 there, those 4 games are hugely important to the rest of the season. It's huge because then they can get some reinforcements through the door.
Nigel, maybe we should reflect on how far City have come as a club, because I went to university in the northwest of England, and back in the day I lived with a Manchester City fan. There was relegations, there was the odd triumph. It was more tears than triumph. And that club is transformed. I mean, you're now a global name. Yeah. People talk about Manchester City all over the world. You've come a long, long way from the days of third division football.
I've seen them lose 1-0 at Halifax, which was awful. That was the worst game I've ever seen. Yeah, and they have come a long, long way. Of course they've come a long, long way. Can they stay there? Yeah, of course we can.
You're confident?
Yeah, definitely. With Pep staying for 2 years, the board's stable. The club is very stable, I would say. I think this is, to me, I think if we look back on it in 2 or 3 months' time, it'll be a blip.
So you think...
I'm not saying we're going to win the Premier League, because I don't think we will, but I think we will come good.
Mina, a blip, is that being optimistic? Or, I mean, a blip can very quickly turn into a crisis, can't it?
A blip can, and I would say that it has. But, the thing is that Pep Guardiola has done too much in his career to really doubt that he can't find a solution to all of this. And you just have to wonder about the amount of injuries and, how he can resolve the situation. My fear, though, right now is that they've taken too many hits right now to really know how to get out of the situation. So while I do think that they will win again, I just don't know whether they're going to show us the consistency that they have done in the last 4 years. So I think it's about trying to do that. And right now, you've got a very exciting Premier League because, you do have a solid Liverpool. You've got a Chelsea that are doing much better than we ever assumed that they would at this point. And even, Manchester United under Amorim, there's got to be something that's going to be better than what we've seen. You've even got Tottenham being quite interesting. So it's about, what the other teams can do right now. But I do think they'll win again. But will they be in the Champions League? That's a question, because they've got PSG afterwards, and that's not an easy game, even though they're having their own problems, PSG. Where are they going to be in all these competitions? Because they've got to resolve the situation right now. As Lance said, they've got these next few games that's so important for them. Otherwise, this could be the season.
It is, Lance, a great plot for the Premier League season, though, isn't it? The fact that you've got the fallen champions who look a shadow of what they were, everyone else rising up, Liverpool on the rise, Arsenal are still in there, Chelsea resurgent, Cole Palmer. I mean, it's still the greatest league in the world.
Oh, by miles. By absolute miles. And I think the thing with Liverpool was they showed their credentials this weekend. Red card, early doors. That could have easily been a loss. But that is a championship side. That's what the stuff Manchester City used to do. They still found a way to get a point from that game. Chelsea resurgent. They spent $1 billion to get there. So Chelsea spent a lot of money. Manchester City will need to spend some money. They have 8 players in the current squad over the age of 30. Ilkay Gundogan wasn't supposed to be playing every single game this season. He was brought in to come off the bench for 20 minutes, 30 minutes and play the odd game here and then. Kyle Walker, he looks like he's lost a lot of pace. He looks like a man struggling for confidence. The list goes on. Kevin De Bruyne, I don't think he's going to be at Manchester City for much longer, is he? He looks like he's got 1 foot out the door. His form is dipped completely. They need to get their young players to find their form again. The likes of Phil Foden needs to come alive. I don't know what's going to happen with Jack Grealish. I don't know whether any other club in England's going to sign him with those kind of wages, or if Pep can turn something around there. But I think, yeah, as you say, the Premier League is an extraordinary league to watch at the minute. I think Liverpool definitely at the moment favourites. But for all of Manchester City's woes and 20 points that they've dropped so far this season, they're 3 points behind Arsenal.
It's a good point, Nigel. You're still got a lot to play for.
We're still there. But we could have been right at the top of the league, if we hadn't have had all these problems. I mean, absolutely right. The next 2 games in the Champions League are key. really important to get a result at PSG, and then to beat Club Brugge, very important for the club.
And just tell me, if you don't qualify for Champions League football next season, how much of an impact do you think that will have on the club and the brand and the name?
Maybe temporary. You know, will we still be able to attract the players that we need, that we think we need, and the number of players could have an impact on that.
Nigel, we wish you a very happy new year. I won't wish you luck as a Liverpool fan, but a happy new year to you, to Lance and to Mina as well. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for me, Enda Brady and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.